Hey, Rusty. Jesus. What time is it? Oh, shoot! I gotta do the frickin' finale show. It's the Cyclist Gamer Review Show 5th Anniversary Special! And here is the king of composite cables, the Cyclestian of Cyclestians, the one, the only, in this universe at least, SideQuest Gamer!
Alec.
All right. Hello, everyone. Alec Alger, the SideQuest Gamer here. You know, because I do the SideQuest, man. I do the SideQuest in my review videos. Anyways, welcome to the Season 5 finale. So, let's answer some questions to end off the season and start a new season with a fresh perspective, with a new work ethic, where I'm not bound by some retrospective, you know, where to the point where I just burned out. So, what is the first question for me?
I have one for you. When's the next video?
Well, it's not really a matter of when, but rather what. In other words, what is the next video? That's for me to know and for you to find out.
That's not what I asked.
But in all seriousness, let's see what the next video is with my universal SideQuestian controller that so happens to look like a Switch Pro controller, but it is not. It is a Magic controller. So, without further ado, let's test it out. Well, are you excited? I know I am.
Yay!
Thank you, Glenn. That was very supportive of you. But before showing the rest of the clips, let's answer some questions from other SideQuestians.
SpongeMat B says, B!
Where? A bee in this house? Even though it's the winter time, it's the middle of January, I will not have a bee in this household. I will find it, I will hunt it down, and I will burn its hive to the ground.
Alright, so we've made it to the first question, and already SQG is having a mental breakdown on fake live TV. Next question. Alec!
What?
I'm really gonna need you to stay sober for this next one. Andy Dunn has asked several questions.
I shall pick the best one.
How am I supposed to eat pizza without my drink?
Well, as a self-proclaimed expert on choking on food and almost dying from it because I didn't have a drink nearby that, you know, was pure water or anything like that, well, the trick to eating said pizza is to take a bite out of said pizza, alright? You got that? Now hop on one foot and sing the lyrics to Singing in the Rain. And you gotta keep doing that for 4 minutes, or die trying at least. By then you should swallow the pizza without any problems. Or just one problem, but that will be your last problem. So, that is how you eat said pizza without a drink nearby.
Now what in the Sam Hill kind of answer was that? Just get a frickin' Pepsi or, I don't know, something. Anyways, Lucas the Thing asks, favorite video game trilogy?
Huh. I'm gonna have to think about that one. No joke, there's just so many trilogies out there, but almost all of them have like first game syndrome when the first one is kind of introducing the common elements you would see later expanded upon in the series. In fact, some first games are just ignored outright because they're not as great as later installments. Like, does anyone remember the first Street Fighter? So I'm gonna have to think of a trilogy that didn't even suffer first game syndrome in the same way that other games have. Well, I thought it over, it took me a while, so I've come to the conclusion that despite there are so many trilogies out there that I love, I think the most consistently best trilogy, where all three games are interchangeable to be the best and worst because, you know, all of them are so good for different reasons, I'm gonna say the Sly Cooper trilogy as well as the Professor Layton DS trilogy. Sly Cooper 1, or as it's known as the Thievius Raccoonus, it had a pretty strong start going for like a point A to point B style 3D platformer, where the goal is to get the MacGuffin at the end of the level, but the level design is so freaking creative, having some really memorable set pieces that have some context behind them, and really, I had a great time playing this, but I do prefer a more free-roaming segmented open world-ish style, with a mission structure that 2 and 3 went for, especially since it gave me more of an excuse to use the various gadgets bought on Thief.net. Man, I wish that was a real place. The Sly trilogy, they're not perfect games by any means, but I can safely say that at worst being Sly 1, it is still a very good game, and at best being Sly 2, it can be a freaking masterpiece of game design. Same can be said for the Professor Layton games. Each of the 3 original Trilogy DS games, they just get better and better with more interesting puzzles. Not only that, it had an extremely well written and thoughtful mystery that can even rival that of Arthur Conan Doyle's famous Sherlock Holmes novels. Although, if you're playing Professor Layton, the thoughtful puzzle-style gameplay takes center stage. I mean, if I went over all of the puzzles in the entire trilogy, we'd be here all year. I'll save that for the eventual retrospective, although I'm definitely not doing those games one after the other. That'd be overwhelming. But if you do like puzzle games, this trilogy is most definitely a crown jewel in this genre, not to mention the entire DS catalog, and that handheld had a lot of games.
Whoa, check that out! I cannot believe my ears. A real answer!
Hey, my other answers were thoughtful-ish.
Oh, I'm sure. Anyways, Double KA asks, favorite video game generation?
Oh, cool. It's my buddy Austin. How you doing, Austin? Anyways, to answer your question, favorite video game generation. Now, I've answered this several times in the past Q&As that I've done, but to be honest, nowadays I'm not really satisfied with those answers, so I'm going to elaborate my present thoughts on the best generation, and the answer may surprise you. The first generation of gaming, I respect more than I do enjoy it, even if the arcade games like Pong are just fine. I have nothing against it, it's a simple yet effective game. I do much prefer the second generation. I mean, the Atari 2600 has a lot of short burst but fun experiences, although I definitely prefer the arcade versions of said games if I can get a hold of them. But technology advances for a reason. And Generation 3, it has some really cool games, with Super Mario Bros. 3 being the highest of the high points in that generation, although I've come to the conclusion that each generation gets better and better. Like, I used to be like, the Generation 4, that was the best generation, or I'd be like, the 5th generation is the best one, hey, Crash Bandicoot, and you know, all that jazz. And then there are sometimes I like the 6th generation the most, because remember, even if you were disappointed by the lack of 2D games, like actual 2D platformer games on home consoles, the handhelds are a part of that generation. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. And the Game Boy Advance had some really solid 2D platformers, even if they're ports of Super Nintendo games, they still exist and they're still a part of that generation. and the 7th generation incorporated internet for a more positive experience. I mean, online multiplayer is not technically new, but it's become a little more standard within that generation, especially for games like Halo 3. And that's definitely a lot of fun. Not to mention the PC gaming scene had emulators, and that started to run, the 3rd and 4th generation emulators pretty smoothly. I mean, it's not perfect, definitely not back then, and we've definitely come a long way since then. The point I'm trying to bring home is that the 7th and 8th generations made gaming a universal appeal for everyone, especially games like Dark Souls 1. It should quench the thirst for those difficulty favoring hardcore gamers, the ones who claim that games have just pretty much become movies or something like that, even though they're just ignoring a great portion of the 7th generation. I mean, it's easy to look at the advertising for Uncharted, but you have to look beyond the advertising to get what you want. And a little bit of searching has never hurt anyone. Literally, you can just go on Google, type in a game that appeals to you with design philosophies that you miss, and something should come up, Shovel Knight made the 8th generation for me. Old timers weren't forgotten about and are still a desired consumer base, but there's also something for new players. It's a bit forgiving with its difficulty unless you make it less forgiving by destroying the checkpoints to gain more treasure. It encourages players to make it harder for themselves, but it's not necessarily mandatory. There's also the open world sandbox games that are just an evolution of the stuff we saw in the 6th generation. There's just something for everyone. I don't know why we have to all of a sudden dismiss an entire generation just because mainstream advertising doesn't favor the games that we really like. The unadvertised games are still a part of the generation regardless, and games like Shovel Knight are why, if I had to pick a favorite generation, it's definitely now the current one. There's no time like the present after all, and the present is looking pretty sweet. Now, I'm not excusing new malicious practices like microtransactions plaguing some AAA titles, but there are plenty of games that don't have them, and if you want to vote with your wallet, I suggest supporting the games that don't have these malicious practices. Some may call me naive, but I genuinely believe that the good heavily outweighs the bad in this case. And as long as we keep criticizing the malicious practices, I think the future is looking pretty bright.
However, with the 9th generation eventually coming, if we want it to be even better than this one, as good as it is already, we gotta keep calling out the bad and praising the good. So the design decisions that we actually like, the business practices, the business models that we like, we gotta be hypercritical to get what we want. We gotta make our voices heard. We gotta scream until we make our voices heard. You can take away our money, but you'll never take away our freedom.
Wow. How motivational. Alright, last question before we show a clip of the other Mega Man 4 video. Penguin. You know what? I don't know. They ask, thoughts on emulators? I'm fine with it, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Wait a minute, you're fine with emulators? Think of those poor mega corporations that don't re-release their games even though they can. Think of them. Think of all the employees that can't have a retirement savings. Think about the private islands the CEOs can't have now. Think of poor Nintendo.
Alec, the bottle. Give me the bottle. Give me the bottle. I'm done.
You're no fun.
Anyways, I'm all for emulators. Well, to an extent. In fact, so are developers, whether they want you to realize it or not. Like, emulation has been around for decades now, and only has gotten better and better as these non-profit software devs are figuring out how to produce better quality of life improvements to said emulators. A lot of those Sega re-releases have their own little emulation software that they run on, that while not having as many options as say something like Kega Fusion, and a lot of people have mentioned that the sound is still very off. But it does go to show that emulation shouldn't be so easily shot down by retro snobs when publishers see the benefit of gaming preservation. However, we do need them to make sure that the emulators get better and get more console accurate. Nothing will ever be 100% true to the original hardware, but we can get closer and closer.
But just looking at these open source emulators and what the big publishers put out, it's so freaking sad that the non-profit open source software is so much better than the more limited publisher made emulation software. You know, the same people with millions if not billions of dollars and a better idea of how to make a potential emulator more console accurate. But I suppose they have bills to pay. You know, they have to pay off their new private island somehow, or get a new Corvette or a Porsche.
But yeah, emulators are something we should embrace in the free market, especially publishers. They should re-release their products in not just their original form, but better than the original form. There should be more options available for the consumer instead of just preset options for like that the publisher released. I mean, sure, a 4x3 and 16x9 option is pretty nice, and even adding scanline filter over the emulated products is pretty nice, like the NES and SNES Classic does. But still, compared to the free emulators that are out there today that give the consumer way more options when it comes to video customization, sound customization, it just goes to show that publishers are a lot better about it than they were, say, 10 years ago. Like, does anyone remember the original Wii emulation? Look at the gamma correction. Ugh, this is disgusting. It's too dark. Kirby Superstar should not look that drab and colorless. Like, who okayed that? Who thought that was a good idea? And I know some people are like, but that's to help people that have epilepsy. You know, again, that's perfectly fine to have like an option to darken it so the flashing colors doesn't send someone to a seizure, because epilepsy is something we should take seriously. But there should be the option to darken it or keep the game in its original bright colors as intended. It shouldn't just like make everyone play a darkened version of it. And let me ask you this, those who created the emulators like JNES or what's that, SNES 9X, why do those free emulators have way more options than the emulators that we have to pay a subscription for? Does that make sense? Does it make sense for $1 million company to take shortcuts? One thing for sure, it doesn't make any sense. If you have millions of dollars at your disposal, what's a few thousand to spend on making a very accurate emulator? Now, that's enough questions for now. Let me show you a trailer for an upcoming project that I'm really hyped up about. Finally back. Well, now without a bit of a flesh wound in between the times I've recorded this session. So, this project, it'll take a while, but once I get it done, I can finally move on to other things.
Well, you also have the 5th and 6th videos in the retrospective to do. When's that happening? Spill the beans.
You know what? I am sick and tired of your It's time I fire you, Mafia style.
Alright, not only am I an off-screen voice, but I'm pretty sure you can't even kill me. Look, I'm basically indestructible, alright?
You better not see this.
I really doubt you can kill me. Go ahead, just try.
3,
I bet you can't do it.
2, 1. Right in the eyeball. Oh man, that is so gross. It's like a mess of spaghetti out there. Oh, I am not getting the bloodstains out of the carpet. You know what? We need a cleanup crew. I can't work like this. This is too distracting.
Whoa, Mr. Alec Elger, the Cyclops Gamer. Finding you was not easy, but thankfully, my search might come to an end rather quickly and I can go home and collect my payment. You think the rules just don't apply to you at all? Well, unfortunately that's not the case, but if it does make you feel any better, just know this. It's nothing personal. It's just one of the side effects of business. I think you'd understand that.